Good afternoon, students. Are you hearing my voice? Right. In our last class, we completed a third unit of paper 2, Social and Economic History of Modern India. Particularly in the module 3rd, we discussed about various social women and male reformers who contributed their life towards the emancipation of the women in India, basically. We covered Savitribai Phule, Pandit Ramabai, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, M.G. Ranade, Raja Rammohan Rai, and other reformers who contributed their life towards the upliftment of women in India. Okay, so after completion of the third module in the paper 2, again we are going with the third module of paper 3, History of Dalit Movements in India, 1909, 1900 to 1940s. Here, in this paper also, we covered or completed first two modules. Okay, so in the first module, we completed the concept of the Dalit, definition and meaning, and nationalist, Marxist, and subaltern approach towards the Dalit movements in India. And we also complete various causes for the Dalit movements. In the second module, we completed the origin of and the development of caste system and colonialism and modern education and Sanskritization, Brahmanization, and democratization of political, social, and economic institutions, and liberation of Dalits, and role of Christian missionaries, and growth of Dalit consciousness. Okay, so all these are the various uh, concepts within the history of Dalit movements we completed earlier. Today, we'll go with the third module, anti-caste movements in colonial India. So we'll see what are the important causes for these anti-caste movement, which were taken place in a colonial period, and what are the various anti-caste movements which started in India, basically. Okay, you are aware that Adi Dravida movement in Tamil Nadu, Adi Hindu movement in Hyderabad and Andhra, and Adi Karnataka movement in Mysore, and Jyotiba Phule's non-Brahmin movement, and Adi Dharma movement in Punjab, and Satnamis of central provinces, Adi Hindu movement in UP, and Namsudra movement in Bengal, and various movements you are aware. So all these movements which is under uh, under a platform called anti-caste movements. Okay, so Adi Dravida movement you are well known. Because of Adi Dravida movement, these political parties like DMK and AIDMK are emerged, and within the Adi Hindu movement, You already aware that you already aware that Adi movement India, by inspiration of the Adi Dravida, Adi Hindu movement has started in Telugu lands also, particularly in the Hyderabad state. It's a great, great contribution from the Bhagirathi Varma. So likewise, many movements, anti-caste movements, which is are basically against Brahminical hierarchy and various social evils and also superstitions which prevailed in Indian society. Okay, so we'll go one by one in later classes. And today we see basically what are these anti-caste movements and what are the important causes for these anti-caste movements. Okay, so I will share my screen again, and I will share my screen again, and I'll go with the details. Okay, so the mobilization of oppressed and exploited sections of society, the peasants, Dalit, women, and low caste that Pule had spoken of as Shudras and anti Shudras, occurred on a large scale in the 1920s and 1930s. And under varying, under varying leadership and with varying ideologies, they took part in nationalist campaigns, some of them hailing Gandhi as a kind of messianic figure. They organized unions and Kishan Sabhas. They staged strikes, anti rent campaigns, and revenue tax boycotts. They fought for forest and village commons. It was an era following the First World War and the Russian Revolution, when the masses were coming onto the stage of history. Inevitably, the specificities of caste exploitation could not be ignored in India. Many low caste activists of the 1920s, organizing as non Brahmins and Dalits, were drawn to an anti caste, anti Brahmin, even anti Hindu ideology of the kind that Pule had formed. Since few whites outside Maharashtra had heard of Pule, most likely it was the Tamil non-Brahmin movement which had the most influence as the strongest initiator of non-Aryan themes. Yet so pervasive were these that is clear that the theme struck a deep mass resonance everywhere. They very use of Aryan discourse by the elite was evoking a common response, which in its turn was to force the elite to revise this discourse significantly. The non-Brahmin movements in Maharashtra and Tamil Nadu, as well as the Dalit movements arising in the places as distant as the Punjab and Karnataka all began to argue in terms of Aryan conquest and Brahmin exploitation through the religion. The new identities that most of the Dalits adopted in the 1920s, Adi Dharma in Punjab, Adi Hindu in UP and Hyderabad, Adi Dravida, Adi Andhra, and Adi Karnataka in southern India, indicated a common claim to be being original inhabitants. Okay, so and which is uh, in Andhra, where the process was affected by the militant Dravidianism of the Madras Presidency. The commercialized coastal areas produced both a mobile Dalit agricultural laborers class and a small educated section. A proposed conference of Dalits in Vijayawada in 1917, by the reformist sponsored by the reformist Hindus, was to be called the first provincial Panchama Mahajana Sabha, but changed its name in a mood of revolt to the Adi Andhra Mahajana Sabha on the grounds that the so-called Panchamas were the original sons of the soil and they were the rulers of the country. Okay, so the details were a militant mood. The major temple in the city closed down the 3 days for their uh, uh, for 3 days for their conference for over a decade and half after that until they became observed as Harijans into the Congress and communist movements. Coastal Andhra Dalits had held conferences as Adi Andhras. By the 1931 census, nearly a third of the Malas and Madigas of Madras Presidency had given their identity as Adi Andhra. The Vijayawada conference was presided over by Bhagireddy Verma, a Hyderabad Dalit originally named Madari Bhagaya, who had been organizing Adi Hindu conference since 1912. Hyderabad had a vigorous, though factionalized petty bourgeoisie Dalit group, which began to pick up the Adi Hindu identity in the 1920s. By the 1930, the state census indicated a rather rigorous cultural debate. Adi Dravida Educational League argued that, judged by the history, philosophy, and civilization of Adi Dravidas, the real aborigines of the Dakkan, the depressed classes are, as a community, entirely separate and distinct from the followers of Vedic religion, called the Hindus. The contention, the league's contention was that Hinduism is not the ancestral religion of the aborigines of Hindustan, that the non Vedic communities of India object to being called Hindu because of their inherited adherence of the doctrines of Manusmriti and like scriptures, who have distinguished themselves from the caste Hindus for centuries past, that the Vedic religion which the Aryans brought in the wake of this invasion was actively practiced upon the non-Vedic aborigines, and that aborigines coming under the influence of Hindus gradually and off consciously adopted Hindu ideas and prejudice. Okay, so in um, Hyderabad, the Tamil Dalits identified themselves as Adi Dravidas. Telugu speaking Dalits called themselves Adi Hindus, but a large section of them gave this a militant anti-Brahmin interpretation. Bhagireddy Verma was a major figure in this group, later identifying the Buddhism and giving tactic support to the younger generation of the radicals who became followers of Ambedkar. In faraway UP2, where Varna traveled for the conferences, a new radical identity arose. Its leading ideology was an untouchable ascetic from the Mainpuri district, who had briefly been a member the of the Arya Samaj. He left it out of disgust and began to the organize the Dalit on the basis of Adi Hindu identity, calling themselves rather calling themselves as a Adi Hindus. Okay, so here the untouchable, because when you see the Achyutanand, one of the prominent reformer, who is argued that the untouchables, the so-called origins are the fact Adi Hindus. The original are out are Nagas, are the Dasas of the north and Dravidas of the south of the subcontinent, and they are the undisputed heavenly owners of the Bharat. All others are immigrants to the land, included the Aryans, who conquered the original populations not by valor but deceit and manipulation. Okay, so likewise, not only these Achyutanand and many other social reformers, many, uh, the majority of the social reformers who supported these Adi Andhra, Adi Hindus, or Adi Dravida, these are these are the lower class sections and outcast people, and they arguing that they were the originals of the originals of the Indian subcontinent. Okay, so originals of the Hindu uh, uh, territory, Indian territory. Okay, so likewise, in Punjab, a Dalit named Mangura, also originally a part of the Arya Samaj, began an Adi Dharma movement in which the Dalits by 1926 had proclaimed themselves a separate community in a conference in a village of Hosirpur district. Okay, so they also arguing that Aryan was are the race of Aryan which invaded India, and they dominant race at present, and who are dominating the whole Indian subcontinent, where the Dravidians were the original, the Hindu Indian inhabitants who were migrated towards the southern part. Okay, so the same feeling with having with all social reformers, who particularly who were the founders of anti-caste movement at that time. Okay, the same feeling all they had. And Manguram, Achyutananda, Bhagireddy Verma, and Kishan Bansode were all of these generations slightly older than the Ambedkar. Okay, they are just before the Ambedkar. They represented a new movement, They were able to build movements because untouchables, even in the villages, had gained some mobility, some access to education. Some went into a new factories and industries that were springing up as part of the limited industrialization going on under British rule. Okay, some were going overseas to plantations plantations in Sri Lanka, Burma, Malaysia, or as far as that the West Indies. Some went as soldiers in the army, gaining uh, gaining both new status and physical as well as the social mobility. Okay, so all of this encouraged a new consciousness and awareness of rights. Others built a limited prosperity on the small holding of the land deriving from the traditional village services, claims, or even acquired from the factory or other earnings. Okay, so the spearheading the Dalit organizations was growing, though still small, educated and semi-educated leaders. Various activities were taken up in the colonial period. On the one hand, social reform included efforts to abolish Devadasi traditions and sub-caste differences, to encourage cleanliness and wearing of clothes indicating a solid social status and not village low caste poverty. Many social reformers fought for giving up drinking or meat eating. Some were part of traditional bhajan groups in the radical bhakti tradition. But organizing also occurred on economic issues. These involved fighting as a factory and mill workers and new efforts to acquire land. Okay, so often a share of common land was demanded from the government. Okay, so while much of this involved linkages which reformist Hindus and acceptance of a basic Hinduist discourse, it was the Adi, the ideologies, based on non-Aryan racial theories that provided the framework for the most militant expressions. It was not that all Dalits, let alone all militant non-Brahmanas, accepted this. There were every region those who choose instead to identify themselves as the Hindus, fighting for the temple entry, for instance. One set of the Dalit leaders, including some rivals of Ambedkar, even went over to the Hindu Mahasabha. But Adi ideology were pervasive ideas that won a popular base. As census reports shows and express the powerful emotional resistance to Brahmanism and caste hierarchy that was embodied in Dalit organizations everywhere in the colonial period. These also provided ideological links with the themes of the non-Brahmin movements of the Madras and Bombay presidencies, and most of the militant Dalits also had some kind of alliance policy with the non-Brahmins. Okay, so however, while the expressions bore similarities to the ideology of Pule, there were crucial differences from the Pule's period that were reflected in the 1920s non-Brahmin uh, Dalit versions, um, Dalit versions of non Aryan themes. First, uh, the whole period of the construction of the Hinduism had intervened with the formulation of increasingly sophisticated ideology of Hindu nationalism and its spread. The founding of major organizations such as the Hindu Mahasabha and the RSS occurred in this period. while the RSS remain an aloof in drawn cadre organizations like the Mahasabha and the Arya Samaj undertook campaigns to win over the lower caste. Okay, so the Shuddhi campaign, which is designed to purify Dalits or convert them back from Islam, was centered primarily in the Punjab and North India. But the ideological appeals that went along with this had a much wider spread. Okay, so one side, a anti-caste and anti-Brahminical organizations are going, and similarly, the supporters of the Aryan race and supporters of the Hinduism and some organizations, those who want to revive Hinduism again, and they are started certain perspective towards the as a Dalit as a part of the Hindu religion. Okay, they want to showing that like the Arya Samaj and Hindu Mahasabha and RSS certain Dalit leaders are the Dalit intellectuals who are having association with these Hindu religious organizations, and they are stating that showing certain theories that these uh, uh, Dalit or lower caste were the part and parcel of the Hinduism, and whenever or whoever who converted into the other religions like the Islam or Christianity, and again they are joining back to the Hinduism by following certain important programs which are followed by the Arya Samaj like Suddhi movement. Okay, so they are creating a certain ideology that these lower castes were not uh, they are not a separate identity. They are not having separate identity. They are part and parcel of the Hindus. Okay, so likewise, they are attracted these lower caste. They started to attract these lower caste as a part of the Hindu society. Okay, so these identified Dalits as a part of Hindu code, and they began to emphasize the low caste origin of figures such as Valmiki and Vyasa to show that Dalits too had a part in the creation of its great literature. Okay, so they are showing certain examples like these Valmiki and Vyasa Vyasa, and both who wrote the Ramayana Mahabharata, and they are not a, a, they are not the people, they are not the people from certain higher sections. They are part and parcel of Hinduism, and even though they belongs to the backward classes. Okay, so likewise, they showing certain perspective to supporting these pro-Hindu nationalists. Okay, so likewise, they are supporting the anti-caste. They are showing their ideology, not directly affecting the Hindus and not affecting upper classes, though they are showing certain sympathy towards the lower class. Okay, so on the other hand, the Dalit activities and peasants and workers of the time confronted the formulation of a radical class ideology by a new left intelligentsia. Young Indian socialist and communist led militant struggles that attracted large sections of exploited and gave them a vision of egalitarian society. but they avoided the recognition of caste and stressed a mechanical class framework that sought to override the traditional identities rather than reinterpret them. It is striking that in the painful confrontation between the Gandhi and Ambedkar after the second roundtable conference, um, uh, when both Gandhians and Hindu Mahasabhaites tried to mobilize the forces against the followers of Ambedkar and promote their solution to the issue. There was no prominent leftist even concerned about the caste. Okay, so Nehru in his autobiography remarks again and again that he saw Gandhi's Arjan campaign as diversionary. Okay, so it led to the diversion of the people's attention from the objective of full independence to the mundane cause of the upliftment of Arjans. Okay, so which is mentioned by Namudri Prasad in his. Okay, so there are many aspects of the resistance dealing with caste. There was inability to even recognize identities such as the Adi Andhra and the communist universally um, adopted the Gandhi term origin without much concern of for whether it would appeal to the people concerned. Okay, it is an identity that uh, to them subordinate to the defined by the identity of untouchables as workers, peasants. Okay, workers and peasants. Okay, so they also saw themselves without much trouble as Hindu. Um, trouble, uh, much trouble as the Hindu and communist striking failed to win their own families away from traditional Brahminic Hindu rituals and practices. However, much they may have ignored their personal. At the same time, communist class ideology defined the industrially employed working class as advanced, while peasants were seen backward, either feudal or petty bourgeoisie. Okay, so um, as Deshpande has argued, Pule was making an effort to formulate a kind of universalistic ideology. He did not identify the oppressed and exploited Sudras and Atishudras as set of the caste so much as a peasant community, nor was the community strictly identified in the social terms. Non-Aryan was okay. So these are and non-Aryan was after all a negative category in the 1920s. In contrast, the communists were putting forward another universalistic ideology. This one did not recognize community or caste as a uh, mode of exploitation. Okay, it threw all non-class categories into the realm of superstructure and uh, relegated to secondary and consequence since they were only cultural or ideological constructs. Okay, so likewise, um, uh, and not only these communists, are many other socialist groups also which supported these anti-caste movements. And as a part of nationalism, as a part of Indian national movement, they are the leaders who are participating in the Indian nationalism, and along with nationalistic movement and uh, the people who had a certain ideology to uplift the lower caste and a similar minded people who started these anti-caste movement. Um, and sometimes they criticizing the Indian national leaders who are following Brahminical ideology. Okay, so likewise, they are supporting the both. They are participating in the both nationalist movement and also as well as anti-caste movements. Okay, so these are various things about anti-caste movements, which we are discussing in the third module of the third paper, History of Dalit Movements in India. Okay, so Chinanage, are you hearing? Yeah, okay, right. Are you hearing my voice, Chinanage?
Yes, sir. Okay, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay, right. So, uh, this is about a certain general introduction about the anti-caste movements, and
Okay.
from next class onwards, we'll see the various anti-caste movements which taken place in India, particularly in the colonial period, and we'll go with Adi. Adi Dravida movement, Adi Hindu, and Adi Dharma in Punjab, and Adi Hindu movement in Uttar Pradesh, and many other places where you find anti-caste movements, particularly in Kerala and Karnataka, Adi Karnataka movement also. Okay, so all these movements we'll see in the later classes, and this is end of my class today, and tomorrow we'll see about Adi Dravida movement. Okay, so shall I end my class, Chinanagaya?
Okay, sir.
Your voice is not uh, clear, Chinanagaya. I'm
Sir,
not
okay,
getting
sir.
your voice. Okay,
Hearing
right.
some.
So I am
Okay, sir.
in my class today. This is end of my
Okay.
class, and I will meet you again tomorrow with another concept. Okay, thank you. Thank you once again. I am ending my class.